College Football Nerds here talking Michigan, and it's not a review of Michigan, Minnesota, just more of a discussion about what we saw from Michigan and how it changes or shapes our perception of who they are or who they can be this year. I want to remind y'all always, please like and subscribe. It helps us out a ton. And let us know in the comments if you saw what you saw from Michigan Saturday. Do you now have them higher than you originally thought, or about where they were? Obviously not lower, because they killed Minnesota and nobody thought that they would win that big. All right, Josh. So what are the themes we had in our previews this summer? And one of the things that we're really hammering this year is you're not going to win a national championship or compete with the elites without top tier offense, but even more specifically, really top either elite or borderline elite quarterback play. And one of the things you said you were encouraged by with him going with Milton was that it indicated that they were willing to maybe have a lower floor in exchange for a higher ceiling with a more explosive quarterback that can make some things happen. So just to get this discussion started, coming into the season, we didn't see, especially with that schedule, Michigan really competing for the Big Ten title or being up on par with Ohio State. Did you see, just in your overall perception of what you saw Saturday, did you see something that maybe gave you a glimpse of hope of thinking they've got enough quarterback to maybe at least keep Ohio State honest in a game on the field?
I did. So we were really critical of Patterson since before he came there. I think a lot of Michigan fans that came onto our channel, we earned respect because we put out a video before Patterson started at Michigan where we said, hey, hold your horses a little bit on Patterson as the savior, talking about what we'd seen with him at Ole Miss, the faults he had, and what both of us viewed as a lot of serious issues with inconsistency that marred his arm talent. And then maybe even his arm talent and accuracy wasn't as, quite as much as build. That panned out over his career at Michigan. It panned out in the NFL draft. I thought in that game against Minnesota, Joe Milton was a more consistent, more accurate, and more decisive quarterback with a better command of the offense than I ever saw from Shea Patterson. And I don't care what the recruiting rankings were. I think Milton is a better passer right now than Patterson ever was. I mean, do you agree with that?
I mean, based on what I saw Saturday, certainly.
So, with that in mind, 225 yards, 10.2 per. There was a lot of explosiveness. Again, only one touchdown passing, but I think they've got something there. And I'm not sure how far they are or not going to go with Milton. He's mobile, or at least reasonably so, that you can do some creative things with him. But he's got the arm to do stuff. And more importantly, I mean, he just ran the offense well. He didn't do really, really stupid stuff. He wasn't running around like a chicken with his head cut off. Patterson would take a play that was developing nicely and bail the pocket or make a stupid throw and not wait on the right read. And Milton looked way more comfortable and reasonable, and I think that's something that's going to benefit him. My concern with Michigan a little bit is with Minnesota. So, but let's talk about that first. I mean, is there anything you want to add about Michigan in the passing game?
Yeah, I mean, for me, that performance was actually better than the box score indicated. I mean, there were some drops there. You touched on a little bit at the end what I saw that I didn't see last year. I saw a more efficient and well-run offense, and that is just as important as making reads and throwing the ball. Is actually running the offense the way it's tailored and crafted. And this might also be a little bit of Gaddis in year two as a play caller. But I saw a lot of encouraging things just from that standpoint. The place that you're going to go, which I think is a fair one, is the run game. And I wonder, though, when you discuss the run game and your concerns, I also want you to think about how it works if they do let Milton run a lot more. Does that change the dynamics a little bit? So why don't we talk about the run game and what we saw there Saturday, and we'll go from there.
The first thing I'll note is that you talk about Milton running more, but Milton had more carries technically than any other back from Michigan. But the run game was weird. It's important to remember that Minnesota only returned theoretically about 4 returning starters, only really one returning starter in the front 7 on their defense. I picked Michigan in this game. We both had it close. We both, more than anything, said we had no idea what to expect between these two teams, given all the turnover. Michigan having a ton of turnover on offense, Minnesota having a ton of turnover on defense. And my point was, from what I'd seen from teams early in the year, turnover on defense could be disastrous. And I think we saw that. I think Minnesota right now, their defense, I think they may be tremendously worse than anticipated. Minnesota is not typically a great recruiting team. They've tried to fill that up with young players, but Fleck hasn't been there very long. And they've got like a true freshman playing inside linebacker, and it showed. And when you look at the stats in the run game, I mean, gaudy stats, 8.3 yards per carry, Haskins 13.7, Charbonnet 17.5. But that's all really deceptive because Charbonnet had a 70-yard carry, Haskins had a 66-yard carry, and outside that, Charbonnet had 3 carries for 0 yards, and Haskins had 5 carries for 16 yards, so about 3 yards per play outside his long. Now, those longs are what matter in terms of the scoreboard and in terms of blowing a team out, but I do think, perhaps strongly, I think there may be a lot of fool's gold in the score and in the statistical yardage for Michigan offensively in that run game. I think, one, quite frankly, Minnesota may turn out to be as bad in the front 7 as LSU is this year in the back 7. With the amount of turnover they had and the talent issue, again, it may be that Minnesota is just woefully deficient. And they've had a lot of guys out for COVID. There's a lot of good reasons for that. Limited practice time, limited ability to tackle. And teams in that situation have been, on a couple of occasions, horrendous for the first few weeks of the season. That may be what this is. And I'm not saying Michigan is a bad offensive football team at all, but I do want to pump the brakes a little bit because it was those busts and explosive plays and poor front 7 play from Minnesota that let this game get completely out of hand. And absent that, this is still a really good Michigan offense, but maybe to the 30-point range or 35-point range, which means this is a 1-2 score game and not a blowout. And I don't, that's just kind of my take on it, and that's my gut feeling. I didn't put them in my top 10. You did. I mean, I don't know if you disagree with that, though. I mean, how much hesitance do you have coming out of that game with Michigan and their offense?
So for me, the concern is last year, I think it was 3.9 yards per carry, the average running the ball. And you don't go from 3.9 to 8.2 or whatever it was without your opponent having something to do with it. I was concerned in the Alabama game last year, and I know year to year teams change. They should have run for 300 yards against that Alabama defense, which was really bad at the end of the year. Really, really bad. They were down so many players. So I wasn't super high on their run game coming in the season, but I do have them in my top 10, and I'll pivot this and turn it back to you and ask you, of the two, if you're a Michigan fan who you want to compete on the highest stage in the Big Ten, of the two, isn't it better that let's say they're just the same at running the ball, which is not great? Wouldn't you rather not great running the ball and have a lot of improvement at quarterback than it be the other way around?
Yeah, totally. So the one thing, I remember the stat, somebody asked me this on Twitter a couple weeks ago. Alabama had 2 of 7 starters in the Michigan game. They were missing 5 of 7 starters due to injury and opt-outs. But yeah, no, if you still have the run game that you had last year, which was not great but serviceable, and I think Charbonnet's a pretty good back, that's fine. The thing you need is a passing game in this day and age because you need to have explosive offense, and passing game is the only way to do that.
All right, so just real quick, I mean, I don't think we're changing our picks for who's going to win the Big Ten or whatever, but based on what you saw Saturday, given that offense, which that's all encompassing because we had concerns about Gaddis, we had concerns about quarterback, offensive line. Given that offense was our biggest concern coming into this season, are you higher on Michigan now based on what you saw, or is it you're giving them an incomplete and you need to see 2-3 more games?
I am higher. Let's remember the start of last year, they played not great teams and looked not good offensively, right? I mean, I know they had a bunch of fumbles and playing a service academy that kills you because you don't get many drives, but they just weren't a great offense and they were super clunky. And to me, it's a step forward just to see Michigan operate efficiently and effectively, because it's been a few years since we've really seen that. And defensively, they've got as many guys coming back as anybody in the country. So if that offense is actually operating in an efficient, effective level, and it's a coherent scheme in 2020 with all the weirdness going on, I don't. It's hard for me to say. I mean, what? Let me ask you this question: what about Michigan, in your view, is inferior to Penn State this year?
So, first of all, they had a lot of fumbles because Shea Patterson never saw a football that he didn't want to fumble. I mean, that was a big part of his problems. So that goes hand in hand with quarterback improvements and offensive performance. And if you take Michigan last year and just take 2 drives a game where they had a fumble and turn those into just 7 points, it's a huge swing for who they are offensively. The thing for me, you talk about Penn State that we've seen enough of last year and now this one game with Indiana. The thing for me where Penn State is lacking is they've basically got Shea Patterson at quarterback who maybe doesn't fumble as much. I don't think there's a better analogy. Like Clifford is Shea Patterson, where he plays sandlot football. He's not going to go out there and consistently run your offense and consistently keep his defense off the field. I think they're both really good defensive teams. I think they're both somewhat depleted at the skill positions. But the difference being Michigan's got a really good, I think, quarterback, at least one that's dynamic, whereas Penn State doesn't, and that's probably the difference for me.
And I do think, I weirdly, I think Patterson was in some ways better than Clifford. I think Clifford's a little bit more consistent. He's a little bit better runner. Like you said, he doesn't fumble as much as Patterson, but Patterson could at least make some wow throws that, like when they were playing Ohio State, if he was hot, he could keep you in a game occasionally. I'm not even sure they have that from Penn State. You can watch our preview for that game against Ohio State, but a lot of my takeaway is I don't think Clifford's capable of playing a high-scoring game. I just don't think he's got it in him. If Michigan can kind of fix these issues and become a consistent team that, again, just showing me they can score 49 in a game like this, they're more talented. They've got more talented on defense than Penn State does, with the opt-out situation being what it is. I think they at least match Penn State in terms of just offensive skill talent. I think, like you said, I've got some concerns about the receiving core, especially when Nico Collins decided to opt out. That's a real problem. But it's there. I think they could easily finish second or third in the Big Ten. I don't know that I'm ready to say they're up there with Ohio State yet, because, again, you got to be able to keep pace, and I'm not sure I could see it. But I've got no reason to think that Wisconsin, as much as they killed somebody on Friday night, I don't know that Illinois is any better than any of these other teams. I don't think they're nearly as good as Minnesota. I think Michigan absolutely could be the thick of things to be at the very top of the Big Ten hunt, especially given that their veteran defense is going to keep them in every game. And a lot of these other teams are going to have a game where the defense just doesn't show up. That's what we've been seeing in all the other conferences. And the few teams like Georgia and like Michigan that actually return almost all their starters have been kind of on a different level in consistency because of that veterancy.
We got to be careful being too positive about Michigan, because we had a run, I think it was a year and a half ago, where we were really high on Michigan. Our model was really high on Michigan. Got a lot of Michigan fans following us, got their hopes up, and then they lost to Ohio State. And I think secretly, a handful of you on MGO blog, that's right, we read everything y'all post over there. Blame us and our model for them losing to Ohio State that year. I think it's still in their heart a little bit, but we are higher on Michigan this year, and we're going to see how it goes. It's an interesting year to follow, because there are opportunities that can be taken advantage of given teams up and down, COVID and everything else that's crazy going on. So we'll keep an eye out. Let us know in the comments what you think about Milton's performance Saturday, and if you're higher on Michigan than you were to start the season. Thanks so much, y'all. Have a great week, and God bless.